For those of you who had to miss our live recording of the Water Resources Outlook, here is an abbreviated version of that live call today. And now let's take a look at the past 30-day precipitation departure from normal. And what this graphic shows is the above normal rainfall across the central Mississippi and through Alabama, and also across the Big Bend region. Quite a bit above normal, in some places almost 8 inches above normal for this time of year. The areas of below normal precipitation include central Florida down into South Florida. Otherwise, over most of the area there's a little bit of both, with above and a little bit below. The past 90 days, which goes all the way back into October, shows above normal precipitations in many of those same areas. The one area that does show deficits now is the South Alabama area, and I'm not showing the drought monitor during this particular briefing, but that is the one area that's showing just a little bit of drought is in South Alabama. However, over most of the rest of the southeast, it's a great big mix, pretty close to normal overall, with some places showing a little bit above and some places showing a little bit below. As we look forward, let's look back for the past 2014 for the whole year, and it is very spotty over the southeast. Again, over the last year and over the last few years, we've seen a mix of above and below normal precipitation. Occasionally we have periods of dry, but they haven't lasted a long time, and occasionally we've had periods of wetness, but they haven't also lasted a long time. So that's why you see a smattering here of above normal and below normal precipitation over most of the southeast. A pretty normal type year for the southeast. So let's look at what normal is for the next couple of months. Here's January, and as you can see, we have precipitation values in central Alabama, South Alabama, around the 5 and 6 inch marks in a couple of spots, and then in the Georgia mountains 6 inches. It tapers off as we get a little further north into the 4 and 3 inch range up into the Carolinas. We're getting into the wet season in the southeast, except for Florida, where we're starting to see the dry season, which is why you see those low values below 2 inches from central Florida south. For February, it's very similar, with maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less rainfall, but not that much less. Very similar to what we've seen in January, but March tends to be a little bit more widespread, heavier rainfall. And there's a big transition as we go from the beginning of March to the end of March. Even the rains don't quite mean as much at the end of March as the beginning. As the trees start to leaf out, there's this competition for the water by all the foliage and all the things that are leafing out at that time. So it changes a little bit. Even though we may get lots of rain in that much, the dynamics kind of change a little bit. So there's obviously concern during that time, because it's when we can get the most rain and can get the most runoff. But hopefully by the end of March, we're looking in a little bit better shape, because April we don't see quite as much rainfall. And then we do have plenty of leaves on the trees, plenty of water. The competition for the water heats up at that time. So that's what we're looking at from a normal standpoint. As for our river flood climatology, well, we're only in the beginning of the second week of the year, and we're looking ahead at the peak season. And as you can see, that peaks at about week 11, so this is right around the March time frame, somewhere during the March time frame, and then starts to taper off as we get into April and May. And we have a second peak during that hurricane season, but really, as far as the recharge season for reservoirs and for the potential flood season, we're right in the middle of it right now. Now, in Florida, it's a little bit different. Now, in northern Florida, in the Swanee Basin and around Jacksonville and Tallahassee, they do have a bit of a winter rainfall pattern because they're close to the southeast, but they also mix in with the dry season a little bit as you get a little further south. So there is a little bit of that, but in the summertime they also have a wet season, and you can see a hint of that in there also. For the rivers on the bottom graph, for central Florida, you can see that we have a little bit of a flood season during the winter, because that's their dry season, and so typically doesn't happen, but occasionally on a year where we have an El Nino or something like that, we will get some. However, as we go into the summer months, which is their wet season, that's when they see the most flooding. So what is our 28-day average stream flow over the southeast? Well, most of the southeast is seeing normal stream flows, with above normal stream flows in those areas recently where we've seen heavier rainfall, including the Tom-Bigby Basin, and then as we get over into the Swanee Basin in South Georgia and North Florida, and then through parts of Florida. So right now, for the most part, pretty average over most of the southeast, and Jeff will talk a little bit later about how this factors in with our future forecast.
So given the past rainfall and the current stream flows, let's look at how the reservoirs are doing. We can see, starting in Georgia, most of the reservoirs are looking pretty good in terms of water supply, as they are mostly near or above their target pools. Recent rainfall amounts have sent some pools higher. We see there at Lake Allatoona we had a recent spike, but the Corps of Engineers is expecting the pool to return closer to the guide curve over the next few weeks. That is expected as well at Carter's Lake. We saw a spike with the rainfall and should see it come back toward the guide curve of 1072 over the next few weeks, given normal conditions. For the Chattahoochee there at Lake Lanier, the pool right now, the pool is right at guide curve, and the Corps is expecting it to be near there, given the normal rainfall conditions. Right there at 1070. So overall, Georgia reservoirs looking good. Looking over at North Carolina and several of the Wilmington Corps of Engineer reservoirs, and we see that they are all near target at this time. John H. Kerr, not shown here, is a little above guide curve as well, with the pool near 300 feet elevation, which is good as the guide curve is with many of the reservoirs. We see the guide curves increase as we head into March and April. Looking at South Carolina, pretty much the same. Reservoirs near their targets. And again, we should see some of these reservoirs begin to raise their pools into March and April. Now let's look at Alabama, and again, most running near or above their target pools due to recent rainfall. Many of these are Alabama Power and Corps of Engineer lakes. And finally, not to forget our big lake in the southeast, Lake Okeechobee, average lake elevation around 15.1, 15.2, which is running high, but this is pretty normal. As we go into the summer, typically these levels continue to fall with the dry season, normally to around 14 feet by midsummer. So that is where we are with our lakes, looking pretty good as far as water resources. I'm going to pass it on to Chris for our short to medium range meteorology and forecasts.
We're starting the period with a rather benign weather pattern across the southeast, mostly a straight line zonal flow. But of note is a developing low pressure system to the west of Texas by Friday, and then as we go through the next couple days, we're going to see this low open up, move eastward, and that's going to track southwest to northeast across the southeast U.S. From Sunday night and into Monday. Looking out further in the period, the GFS is showing another shortwave trough, another system moving across the southeast by Thursday. At this range, there's a lot more uncertainty, though, so timing of this system is still something that we're going to be looking at as the system approaches and we get closer to Thursday.
Well, thanks, Chris. I know we've been talking about ENSO and the potential for El Nino for the last 6-9 months. And so now we'll continue talking about it. And the last 2 months, the temperatures out on the Pacific Ocean have been above normal and would lead us towards possibly having an El Nino condition as we go forward. And all we need is a few more months of that for this to be officially designated as an El Nino period. But that is still iffy right now due to the fact that it looks like possibly the temperatures could be cooling over the next couple of months. So here's a kind of a look at that forecast and the look at the potential here, the consensus probabilistic ENSO forecast. And as you can see, the red bar for the December, January, and February, that shows a 60% chance of having one more seasonal period of having El Nino conditions. But you get to January, February, March, and February, March, and April, and the chances for neutral overtake those chances for El Nino. Not by a lot, but it still gives almost equal chances to one or the other. So there is a possibility that when all this is said and done, that this won't even be designated as an El Nino period just because we didn't have it for long enough. However, our temperatures are warmer in the Pacific right now, and they're still leaning our forecast towards an El Nino forecast. Here's the 1 month outlook for January 2015, and it does show wetness over the northern Alabama, Mississippi area, and we've seen some wetness early in the month in those areas. As for the rest of the southeast, equal chances for below normal or above normal precipitation in those areas. And again, this is just for the month of January. As for the seasonal, it's a very classic El Nino look, where we have rain in the southern tier of the western U.S. and central parts of the U.S. and then wetness in Florida and the south part of Georgia, South Carolina, and into North Carolina, with dryness up to the north in the Ohio Valley. So this is very classic El Nino. Whether we get that or not is still up in the air. Whether we actually are falling into an El Nino right now, it's not clear, and so it's possible that we could end up being more equal chances where we see the spotty type rainfall that we've been seeing over the last year or two. As for the April, May, and June outlooks, well, right now it looks like equal chances because it looks like we'll be coming into a neutral period. There's nothing to sway us one way or the other, so so we're calling for equal chances of below, near normal, or above normal precipitation.
So now, putting all this together, we break our 3-month streamflow forecast down in the regions. We start with the Carolinas. First, it's important to point out that these forecasts are based on a wide variety of objective data to come up with a fairly subjective forecast. Here we have shown in the histograms there past rainfall, stream flows, as well as reservoir conditions. Also, we'd like to look at the CPC rainfall outlooks in addition to utilizing our own ensemble streamflow forecasts and runoff streamflow analogs to come up with the streamflow forecast you see there in the green bar. So overall, our attempt is to try to create a recipe for a multi-based long-term streamflow outlook here. So first we look in North Carolina, and you see there the past rainfall, reservoirs, and streamflow all near normal, expected long-term rainfall near normal, and so our overall streamflow forecast for those watersheds in North Carolina near normal. Same thing as well for South Carolina. For the most part, we did see more rain in the past, so that was above normal, but the reservoir, stream flow, and the rainfall forecast, precipitation forecast for the next 3 months near normal. So we're looking at near normal stream flows through March. Going west and south, the Tombigbee and the Alabama watersheds, as well as the Coosa and Tallapoosa, the rainfall was above normal in the past. However, the reservoirs, again, stream flow, and our precipitation forecast calling for near normal conditions. And with that being said, looking for near normal stream flows across this portion of the region. And in Georgia, past rainfall above normal, as well as the current 30-day stream flows above normal. But the reservoirs and the CPC outlook calling for across most of the region near normal. And so we're hedging our forecast with near normal stream flows across most of Georgia. And then finally in the south, looking at the Suwannee and the St. Mary's in that North Florida section, past rainfall was above normal. Couldn't really look at reservoirs because we don't have too many in this part of the region. But as far as stream flows and the CPC outlook for precipitation, calling for above normal, and our 3-month stream flow forecast, again, calling for above normal. Looking south into Central Florida and South Florida, past rainfall, as Todd was showing, below normal for the last 30 days. But the current reservoirs near normal, but the stream flow past 30 days, as well as the rainfall outlook above normal. So with all this combination, as well as looking at the ensemble stream flow predictions for those Central Florida forecast basins calling for near normal conditions, there's a little bit more uncertainty in this area, as Todd had explained earlier about the ENSO, as far as the forecast down here in Central Florida. So with all this in mind, here's our overall stream flow forecast for our primary recharge period, January through March, which is also our primary flood period when considering the entire southeast. And we see we are expecting near normal stream flows from most of the southeast, with the exception of the Choctawhatchee, the Withlacoochee, the Suwannee, and the Santa Fe there in that light shaded green, where we have a higher confidence that we could see above normal stream flows for the next 3 months. Now, this doesn't mean that we'll see above normal stream flows the entire 3 months. It just means that over the entire 3 months, we will average out above normal in terms of the stream flows.
With all that being said, our bottom line, in the short term, it looks like we'll stay active, but that's pretty normal for this time of year. Again, when we talk about a normal stream flows and normal spring floods, we do tend to see, except for maybe Central Florida and South Florida so much, we do tend to see some flooding in a normal year. But we don't see it as excessive right now, and we do see it just as more spotty, at least for the time being. As for the long term, weak El Nino or neutral, it's still kind of up in the air, and it probably will have at least some impact on our winter into spring rainfall. But right now it's looking like normal fluctuations between some flooding and some dryness, and so that it won't be extensive. Thank you for listening to this Water Resources Outlook. If you have any questions or any comments or want to add anything, please contact any one of us, Todd Hamill at NOAA.gov, or Jeffrey Dober at NOAA.gov, or Christopher Schaefer at NOAA.gov, and we will get back to you and hopefully answer your questions. Thanks again.